The Riddle of the Earth, Chapter 1, Recent Atmospheric Disturbances. The year 1924 is very appropriate as the point of an inquiry into these causes, for world weather in the northern temperate and subtropical belts of latitude has been extremely eccentric since the beginning of September 1923. Cold, wet, marked by violent gales and atmospheric disturbances, and with a summer notably deficient of settled weather, warmth, and sunshine. The position in the British Isles was such that the crops had in most parts been a failure, and farmers found themselves in a precarious financial position in consequence. To understand the weather of 1924, it is advisable to revert first to September 1923, when at noon, September the 1st, occurred the Tokyo earthquake, which synchronized with cold and wet weather, although prior to that it had been normal. Perhaps it would be permissible to go back further, as the Chile earthquake of November 1922, a very disastrous series of shocks accompanied by a tidal wave 180 feet high, which picked up big sailing ships and in some instances hurled them inland a quarter of a mile. In the British Isles, the wet weather was by some experts attributed to the presence of the largest sunspot since March of that year. It may be more justly credited or debited to the Chile earthquake, for these events, as will be shown, cause a considerable disturbance to the atmosphere and take some time to enable conditions to resume the normal. A succession of earthquakes results in continued depressions, although as far as the British Isles are concerned, the affected localities must be considered. The Gulf Stream, which acts as a centre of distribution of atmospheric disturbances, collects these, and with the prevailing southwest winds bring these depressions across the Atlantic to the British shores. But the system spread wider than the Atlantic alone, and British farmers cannot remain indifferent to earthquakes in the Cordilleras any more than in Japan. For the British Isles, as the dumping ground of much of the after effects, is like old Elias, who kept the winds in a cave on his island. In addition to the Chile earthquake, are other major atmospheric disturbances have to be noted. Sometime about August 1922, a new volcanic island made its appearance suddenly off Saigon in French Cochin, China. In July 1923, the master of the steamship Jacobs reported it to the hydrographer's office in Washington. It was dark in colour, with steep cliffs about 100 feet in height and between 2 and 3 miles in length. The sea, said Reuters' report, was washing away loose material, and repeated explosions were heard at intervals of about a minute, causing huge waves. In March 1924, the crater was reported to be active. It is certain that a new island of such magnitude could not have been created without exerting considerable atmospheric effects over a wide region. A comparatively minor occurrence was the Amalfi Landslip, so called at the end of March 1924. It covered a narrow track, but its destruction was marked, for several villages above Amalfi, perched on the mountainside, were said to have been destroyed, and one village was partially buried under an enormous rock, while the famous terrace at the Cappuccini Convento Hotel at Amalfi was swept away. Furthermore, this landslip occurred suddenly, was accompanied by a tidal wave which devastated the coast over a length of a quarter of a mile, and Stromboli to the south burst into eruption. It caused considerable damage to property, and over 100 lives were lost, mainly by being struck by rocks.